Welcome, weary traveler of the night, to the very beginning, not just of stories, but of everything. Before the world had a name, before gods had grudges, before mortals had Mondays, there was chaos. Not the kind of chaos where your laundry eats your socks, or your phone vanishes into the couch cushions. No, this was primordial chaos, the original blank canvas, a vast, yawning void of nothingness. No stars, no sky, no Wi-Fi, just potential. Like the universe was waiting for someone to hit start. From this sleepy soup of existence, things began to stir. First came Gaia, the earth, soft, round, and ready to cradle creation, like a cosmic pillow. She didn't roar or rumble. She simply was, warm, maternal, and probably excellent at baking metaphorical cookies. Then came Tartarus, the deep abyss beneath the world. Tartarus was the universe's basement, dark, mysterious, and full of things you didn't want to deal with, like monsters, regrets, and expired ambrosia. Next arrived Eros, the force of love and attraction, not the cheeky cherub with arrows. This was the raw, primal glue of the cosmos. Thanks to Eros, things started sticking together, like socks in the dryer, but more poetic. Then came Nyx, night, and Erebus, darkness, the universe's first goth couple. They were moody, mysterious, and had a flair for dramatic lighting. Their children included Hypnos, sleep, Thanatos, death, and Oneiroi, dreams. Basically the entire cast of your average midnight existential crisis. And so, from the quiet of chaos, the first whispers of the world began, not with a bang, but with a yawn. The universe didn't explode into being. It drifted into it, like a sleepy god, rolling over and mumbling, "Fine, I'll make a planet. So, if you're still awake, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Tartarus, Olympus, or somewhere in between. And now, tuck yourself in as we drift toward the mother and the sky. Gaia and Uranus shape the first world. After chaos yawned the universe into existence, Gaia, the earth, stretched out like a cozy blanket across the void. She was lush, fertile, and ready to host creation. But even the most comfortable blanket needs a ceiling, and so came Uranus. The sky. Uranus was vast, blue, and a bit clingy. He hovered over Gaia constantly, pressing down like a weighted blanket with commitment issues. Together, they formed the first world, earth below, sky above, and a whole lot of awkward silence in between. But silence didn't last long. Gaia, ever the multitasker, began giving birth to beings. First came the Titans, tall, powerful, and prone to philosophical debates and dramatic sighing. Then came the Cyclopes, one-eyed blacksmiths who could forge thunderbolts but couldn't find their glasses. And finally, the Hecatoncheires, who had 100 hands each and were banned from charades forever. Uranus, however, wasn't thrilled. He took one look at these strange, powerful children and said, "Nope." Instead of building a nursery, he shoved them back into Gaia's womb, which, let's be honest, was rude, painful, and not covered by divine insurance. Gaia, understandably fed up with being treated like a storage unit, began to grumble. Her grumbles turned into groans. Her groans turned into plotting. She whispered to her children, "One of you needs to handle this sky guy." Enter Cronus, the youngest Titan with a sharp mind and an even sharper sickle. Gaia handed him the celestial gardening tool and said, "Snip, snip." Cronus, ever the obedient son, waited for Uranus to descend for his nightly hover and, well, let's just say Uranus stopped hovering. From the severed sky came Aphrodite, born from sea foam and scandal. The Furies also emerged, shrieking vengeance and looking like they hadn't slept since chaos. It was a messy breakup, cosmically speaking, with Uranus dethroned and Gaia finally able to stretch without celestial pressure. The world began to settle. The Titans took over, Cronus became king, and Gaia sighed, not with relief, but with the knowledge that family drama was just getting started. Gaia, the Earth, had finally stretched out in peace. No more sky pressing down on her like a clingy weighted blanket. With Uranus out of the picture, snipped and sent packing, she could finally breathe and birth. And birth she did. From her fertile soil and cosmic creativity came the Titans, 12 towering beings with names that sounded like luxury perfumes and heavy metal bands. There was Oceanus, the watery one, Hyperion, the light-bringer, Themis, the embodiment of divine law, and Cronus, the ambitious one with a sickle and a suspicious glint in his eye. But Gaia didn't stop there. She also brought forth the giants, enormous and hairy, with tempers as big as their biceps. They weren't evil, just misunderstood. Like that uncle who shows up to family dinners with conspiracy theories and a pet lizard. Then came the Cyclopes, one-eyed blacksmiths who could forge thunderbolts, armor, and probably a mean grilled cheese. They were gruff, loyal, and had a knack for dramatic entrances. And finally, the Hecatonchires, beings with 100 hands and 50 heads. They were loud, chaotic, and impossible to shop for during birthdays. Imagine trying to find gloves for someone with 100 hands. Nightmare. These children of Gaia were powerful, strange, and deeply emotional. They didn't just represent forces of nature. They were forces of nature. Storms, seas, fire, law, chaos, all wrapped up in divine personalities and family drama. Cronus, having dethroned his father Uranus, now ruled over his siblings like a moody middle manager. He set up shop in the cosmos, declared himself king, and probably ordered a throne made of volcanic rock and passive aggression. But Gaia, wise and weary, knew that power never stayed put. She whispered to the winds, even kings must sleep, and when they do, their children dream of crowns. Have you ever wondered how the gods of Olympus came to be? It all starts long before Zeus, with a tale of cosmic betrayal. In the beginning, there was Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth. Their children were mighty, the Titans, the one-eyed Cyclopes, and the 100-handed Hecatonchires. But Uranus, fearing their power, imprisoned them deep within Gaia. Heartbroken and furious, Gaia forged a flint sickle and pleaded for a hero. Only one son was brave enough to answer the call, Cronus. In a moment that would change everything, Cronus confronted his father, ending his reign. From this cosmic clash, new beings arose, the vengeful Furies, the mighty giants, and the beautiful Aphrodite, born from the sea foam. With Uranus gone, Cronus took the throne, and the golden age of the Titans began. But as we know, power is a dangerous game. Cronus had done it. He'd snipped his way to the top, dethroned his father Uranus, and claimed the cosmos like a titan with a to-do list. He was king now, ruler of the heavens, the earth, and probably the celestial snack drawer. But power, as Gaia had warned, is a slippery thing. And the universe? It loves a good plot twist. One day, Cronus heard a whisper, not from Gaia this time, but from the deep, echoing voice of prophecy. It said, "One of your children will rise against you, just as you rose against your father." Cronus blinked, then blinked again, then panicked. He had married his sister Rhea, because in mythological times, family trees were more like tangled vines, and together they began having children. Beautiful, powerful, divine children. But Cronus, now a nervous wreck with a crown, saw each baby not as a bundle of joy, but as a potential usurper. So, he did what any paranoid cosmic ruler would do. He ate them. Yes, ate them. Whole. No seasoning. No side dishes. Just straight up swallowed his newborns like divine vitamins. First came Hestia, then Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Each one gulped down and tucked away in Cronus' SC stomach like a celestial storage unit. Rhea, understandably horrified, tried to reason with him. "Maybe we could just raise them normally," she suggested. Cronus responded by burping thunder. But Rhea had a plan. A quiet, clever, motherly plan. When her sixth child was born, a squirmy little god named Zeus, she wrapped a rock in swaddling clothes and handed it to Cronus. He swallowed it without looking. Honestly, he wasn't winning any parenting awards. Meanwhile, baby Zeus was whisked away to a secret cave on the island of Crete, raised by nymphs, fed on honey and goat milk, and probably taught how to throw lightning bolts before he could walk. And so, the prophecy lingered. Cronus ruled, bloated with children and fear. But somewhere, hidden in the folds of the world, a child was growing. A child with a spark in his eyes and rebellion in his diaper. Rhea was tired. Not just, "I need a nap." Tired. She was cosmically exhausted. Her husband, Cronus, had swallowed 5 of their children whole, not because he was hungry, but because he was paranoid. A prophecy had told him one of his kids would overthrow him. And Cronus took that threat very personally and very literally. So, when baby number 6 was on the way, Rhea decided she'd had enough of the whole eat the baby routine. She hatched a plan, a clever, sneaky, motherly plan. When the time came, Rhea gave birth to a squirmy, spark-sayed little god named Zeus. He was loud, curious, and probably already practicing his lightning bolt grip. But instead of handing him over to Cronus, Rhea wrapped a rock in swaddling clothes and said, "Here you go, dear. Another delicious heir." Cronus, not known for his attention to detail, swallowed the rock without question. Somewhere in his stomach, it joined the rest of his divine children, who were probably playing cards and waiting for a rescue. Meanwhile, Rhea whisked baby Zeus away to a secret cave on the island of Crete. There, he was raised by nymphs, fed on honey and goat milk, and protected by a group of warriors called the Curetes, who danced and clashed their weapons to drown out his cries. Because nothing says stealth parenting like synchronized sword choreography. Zeus grew quickly. He was strong, clever, and had a flair for dramatic entrances. He learned about the world, the stars, and the family drama, waiting for him back home. And as he grew, so did his destiny, like a thundercloud, gathering strength. Rhea, watching from afar, knew the prophecy was still alive. Her son was hidden, safe, and one day he would return, not just to rescue his siblings, but to change the fate of the cosmos. The war was over. After 10 years of thunderous tantrums, boulder-hurling battles, and enough divine drama to fill a dozen soap operas, the Titanomachy had ended. The Titans were defeated, Cronus was cast into Tartarus, and the Olympians, the children of Rhea and Cronus, stood victorious. But victory comes with logistics. The world was vast, and someone had to run it. So the siblings gathered around a celestial table, probably carved from moonstone and decorated with lightning motifs, and drew lots to divide the realms. Zeus, ever the showman, drew the sky. He became king of the heavens, master of clouds, storms, and dramatic entrances. His throne was perched atop Mount Olympus, the highest peak in Greece, and the most exclusive, divine penthouse in existence. Poseidon drew the sea, vast, mysterious, and full of fish with attitude. He built a palace beneath the waves, surrounded by coral chandeliers and dolphins with excellent manners. Hades, quiet and brooding, drew the underworld. He didn't complain. He simply nodded, descended, and began organizing the afterlife, like a cosmic librarian with a flair for shadows. The other siblings, Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, took on roles that shaped the mortal world. Hera became queen of the gods and goddess of marriage, though her own was complicated. Demeter ruled over agriculture, seasons, and the emotional stability of crops. Hestia, gentle and warm, tended the hearth, the divine embodiment of cozy. Together, they built Olympus, not just a mountain, but a mythological headquarters. It had golden halls, ambrosia fountains, and cloud-based Wi-Fi. Probably, the gods moved in, decorated their rooms with thunderbolts and laurel wreaths, and began their reign. But Olympus wasn't just a place. It was a symbol of order, of power, and of the new divine age. Mortals looked up and saw the clouds swirling, the lightning flashing, and whispered stories of the gods above. Zeus, sitting on his throne, looked out over the world. He had won the war, claimed the sky, and built a kingdom. But deep down he knew peace was temporary. Myths are restless. And somewhere in the mortal realm, stories were already beginning to stir. In the secret cave on Crete, Zeus had grown strong, not just physically, though he could probably bench press a mountain, but in spirit, in cunning, and in the quiet certainty that he was destined for something big, like cosmically big. Meanwhile, up in the heavens, Cronus still ruled. He sat on his throne, bloated with swallowed children and bloated with fear. The prophecy still echoed in his ears. One of your children will overthrow you. He tried to ignore it. He tried to eat rocks. He tried to yoga. Nothing helped. But Zeus was ready. With the help of Metis, a clever titaness, with a knack for strategy and herbal remedies, Zeus brewed a potion so potent it could make even a paranoid god lose his lunch. He disguised himself, snuck into Cronus's court, and offered the drink with a smile. Cronus, never one to turn down a mysterious beverage, gulped it down, and then he vomited. Out came Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, fully grown, slightly annoyed, and ready for revenge. It was the most dramatic family reunion in mythological history. Zeus, now surrounded by his liberated siblings, declared war, not just on Cronus, but on the entire Titan regime. The Titanomachy had begun. The battle wasn't a quick skirmish. It lasted 10 years, a decade of thunder, earthquakes, divine grudges, and dramatic speeches. The Titans, led by Cronus and his loyal brothers, fought from Mount Othrys. The Olympians, led by Zeus, fought from Mount Olympus. It was mountain versus mountain, sibling versus sibling, lightning versus raw power. But Zeus had a secret weapon, alliances. He freed the Cyclopes, who forged him thunderbolts so powerful They could light up the cosmos. He freed the Hecaton Kyres, whose 100 hands hurled boulders like confetti. With their help, the tide turned. Cronus and the Titans were defeated, not destroyed. That would be too easy. Instead, they were cast into Tartarus, the deepest pit in existence, guarded by the Hecaton Kyres and surrounded by walls so thick even divine gossip couldn't escape. Zeus stood victorious. The sky crackled. The earth sighed. The prophecy had come true. But victory came with responsibility. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades drew lots to divide the world. Zeus got the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld. The age of the Olympians had begun. The Olympians had settled into their divine penthouse atop Mount Olympus. Zeus ruled the sky with thunderbolts and flare. Poseidon swam in his underwater palace with dolphins and drama. Hades organized the underworld like a brooding accountant. The world was divided, the heavens were humming, and the gods were finally ready to decorate their new reality. But something was missing. There were stars, storms, and sacred rituals. There were nymphs dancing in forests, and satyrs playing panpipes in meadows. But there were no mortals, no curious little beings to worship, wonder, and occasionally mess things up in entertaining ways. Enter Prometheus. Prometheus was a Titan, one of the few who had sided with Zeus during the Great War. He was clever, compassionate, and had a soft spot for underdogs, while the other gods were busy throwing the lightning parties and inventing ambrosia recipes. Prometheus looked down at the empty world and thought, "We need someone to appreciate all this." So he rolled up his sleeves. Metaphorically, gods don't wear sleeves. Grabbed a handful of clay and began to sculpt. He shaped arms, legs, eyes, and hearts. He gave them curiosity, creativity, and just enough stubbornness to keep things interesting. He molded humans, fragile, flawed, and full of potential. His brother, Epimetheus, whose name literally means afterthought, was in charge of handing out traits to all the animals. Strength to lions, speed to cheetahs, flight to birds. By the time he got to humans, he'd run out of gifts. Prometheus sighed and said, "Typical." But Prometheus wasn't done. He taught humans how to walk, how to speak, how to admire sunsets, and ask annoying philosophical questions. He gave them art, music, and the ability to invent things like spoons and sarcasm. The gods watched with mild amusement. Zeus, however, was skeptical. He saw humans as noisy, needy, and dangerously curious. He warned Prometheus not to give them too much. "They're cute," Zeus said, "but let's not get carried away." Prometheus nodded, then immediately got carried away. He looked at his clay creations, shivering in the cold, fumbling with sticks, and thought, "They need fire." Prometheus had done it. He'd sculpted humanity from clay, breathed life into them, and taught them how to walk, talk, and occasionally invent spoons. But as he watched his fragile creations shiver in the cold, fumble in the dark, and try to cook lentils with rocks, he knew they needed something more. They needed fire. Fire was sacred. Fire was divine. Fire was the ultimate cosmic upgrade. Warmth, light, power, and the ability to toast marshmallows. But Zeus had forbidden it. "Mortals are cute," he said, "but let's not give them everything." Prometheus disagreed. One night, while Olympus was distracted by a thunderstorm fashion show, Zeus loved dramatic weather. Prometheus snuck into the divine forge. He tiptoed past sleeping Cyclopes, grabbed a glowing ember, and tucked it into a hollow fennel stalk, nature's original thermos. He descended to earth and gifted fire to humanity. The first flames flickered, the first sparks danced. Mortals gathered around the warmth, eyes wide, hearts full. They cooked, crafted, and created. Civilization began, all thanks to one rebellious titan with a soft spot for underdogs. Zeus was not amused. He thundered. He roared. He probably threw a lightning bolt at a decorative cloud. Prometheus had broken the rules, defied the king, and empowered the clay-born creatures below. Punishment was inevitable. So Zeus ordered Prometheus chained to a mountain, high, cold, and lonely. There the Titan was bound with unbreakable chains, his body stretched across the rocks, his spirit unbowed. And every day, an eagle, Zeus' personal punishment, courier, swooped down and pecked at Prometheus' liver. Not his ego, not his pride, his liver, because in mythological biology, livers regenerate overnight, making it the perfect eternal torment. Prometheus endured. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He stared at the sky and whispered, "They have fire now. That's enough." But the story didn't end there. Somewhere in the distance, a hero was growing, a mortal with strength, courage, and a knack for breaking divine rules. One day, he would climb that mountain and change everything. After Prometheus gave fire to humanity, a glowing gift of warmth, light, and the ability to roast chestnuts, Zeus was furious. Not just, "I stubbed my divine toe." Furious. He was cosmic vendetta, furious. Prometheus had defied him. Mortals now had fire, ambition, and the audacity to invent toast. Zeus couldn't take fire back, but he could do something else, something sneaky, something poetic. He would give humanity a gift, a beautiful, mysterious, dangerous gift. So Zeus summoned Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, and said, "Make me a woman, not just any woman, the first woman. Make her perfect, make her irresistible, make her confusing." And so, from clay and divine craftsmanship, Pandora was born. She was stunning. She was curious. She was gifted with talents from every god. Aphrodite gave her beauty, Hermes gave her charm, Athena gave her grace, and Zeus gave her a jar, not a cookie jar, not a jam jar, a forbidden jar, sealed tight, mysterious, and accompanied by one very specific instruction. Do not open this. Pandora was sent to Earth, where she dazzled mortals and married Epimetheus, Prometheus's brother. Epimetheus, whose name means afterthought, didn't question the sudden arrival of a divine bride with a suspicious container. He was just happy to be included. But Pandora was curious. The jar sat in the corner, humming with secrets. It whispered to her in dreams. It pulsed with mystery. And one day, she couldn't resist. She lifted the lid, and out came everything. Sickness, sorrow, envy, greed, mosquitoes, taxes, awkward small talk. All the woes of the world spilled out, swirling into the air and scattering across the earth. Humanity, once warm and hopeful, now shivered with fear, pain, and confusion. Pandora gasped. She slammed the lid shut, but it was too late. Almost. Inside the jar, one thing remained. Small, flickering, fragile. Hope. It fluttered in the darkness, glowing softly. Pandora opened the jar just enough to let it out, and hope, the last gift, the quiet comfort, drifted into the world. Zeus watched from Olympus, satisfied. Prometheus had given fire. He had given balance. And Pandora, the first woman, had given humanity its greatest paradox, suffering, and the strength to endure it. Mount Olympus was majestic, Golden halls shimmered in the clouds. Ambrosia fountains bubbled beside marble columns. Gods lounged on celestial cushions, occasionally tossing thunderbolts for fun. But beneath the divine glamour, one goddess sat with perfect posture and a gaze that could curdle nectar. Hera, queen of the gods. She was regal, powerful, and deeply committed to the concept of marriage. Unfortunately, her husband was Zeus, king of the gods, ruler of the sky, and serial romantic, with a flair for dramatic entrances and questionable disguises. Zeus had a habit, a very mythological habit. He fell in love, often with mortals, nymphs, goddesses, and occasionally people who didn't even know they were in a myth yet. And he didn't just flirt, he transformed into a swan, a bull, a shower of gold, even a cloud. If there were awards for creative seduction, Zeus would have swept the pantheon. Hera, however, was not amused. She kept track. She knew the names. Io turned into a cow. Leda, seduced as a swan. Europa, whisked away by a bull. Danae, visited as golden rain. Hera didn't just hold grudges. She embroidered them into her divine robes. Her wrath was legendary. She sent storms, curses, and inconvenient transformations. She turned rivals into animals, scattered their children across the world, and occasionally invented new types of suffering just to stay creative. But she never confronted Zeus directly. Instead, she ruled Olympus with icy grace, a raised eyebrow, and the quiet power of someone who knows everything. Despite the drama, Hera wasn't just a jealous wife. She was the goddess of marriage, women, and family. Mortals prayed to her for weddings, childbirth, and the strength to survive awkward family dinners. She was fierce, protective, and deeply dignified, even when the skies were swirling with Zeus's latest romantic escapade. And yet, through all the chaos, Hera remained. She sat beside Zeus on the throne. She guided the gods. She watched the world. And she waited, not for revenge, but for respect. Because in the end, Hera wasn't just the queen of Olympus. She was the queen of endurance in the golden fields of the mortal world, where wheat swayed like sleepy lullabies and flowers bloomed with reckless joy, lived Persephone, daughter of Demeter, goddess of agriculture and seasonal vibes. Persephone was radiant. She danced through meadows, braided vines into her hair, and giggled at butterflies. She was spring incarnate, light, life, and the promise of picnics. Demeter adored her. The two were inseparable, like sunshine and soil. But beneath the earth, in the shadowy realm of the underworld, someone else watched. Hades, ruler of the dead, lord of shadows, and owner of the quietest kingdom in existence, had grown weary of solitude. His realm was organized, efficient, and deeply lacking in floral arrangements. One day, he saw Persephone, and something stirred. Not just longing, but a cosmic ache. He wanted her, not as a prisoner, as a queen. So he made a plan. One afternoon, as Persephone wandered alone, a flower bloomed. Impossibly beautiful, unnaturally vibrant. She reached for it. The ground trembled. A chasm opened. And from the depths, Hades emerged in a chariot of obsidian and silence. He swept her away before the petals could fall. Demeter was devastated. She searched the world, called to the winds, interrogated the rivers. But no one answered. The earth grew cold. Crops withered. Trees sighed. Winter arrived, not as a season, but as a sorrow. Eventually, Helios, the sun god who sees everything, even awkward moments, confessed Hades took her. Demeter stormed Olympus. She demanded justice. She threatened eternal famine. Zeus, caught between two powerful siblings, brokered a deal. Persephone would return, but only if she hadn't eaten anything in the underworld. Unfortunately, she had just 6 pomegranate seeds, small, juicy, and symbolically inconvenient. So, a compromise was struck. Persephone would spend 6 months with Demeter, bringing spring and summer, and 6 months with Hades, ruling the underworld as queen, ushering in autumn and winter. The seasons were born, not from weather patterns, but from a mother's grief and a daughter's dual destiny. Persephone, once a meadow sprite, became a sovereign of shadows. She wore crowns of bone and blossoms. She ruled with grace, balancing life and death, warmth and chill. And every year, when she returned to the surface, flowers bloomed in celebration, not just of spring, but of reunion. The gods had settled into Olympus. The seasons danced to Persephone's rhythm. Prometheus had sculpted humanity, and Pandora had opened the jar. The world was alive, messy, magical, and full of stories. But something new was stirring. Mortals, once fragile clay figures, warmed by stolen fire, began to dream bigger. They built cities, sailed seas, and stared at the stars with ambition in their hearts. And from among them rose a new kind of legend, the hero. Heroes weren't gods. They weren't immortal. They didn't have thunderbolts or ambrosia fountains. But they had something else, something the gods found both fascinating and mildly threatening: willpower. The first heroes were born of divine and mortal unions, the result of Zeus' romantic resume and other gods' occasional curiosity. These demigods had strength, courage, and just enough dysfunction to make their stories unforgettable. There was Perseus, son of Zeus and Danae, who would one day face a snake-haired menace. There was Theseus, destined to navigate labyrinths and awkward family reunions, and Heracles, whose muscles were matched only by his list of chores. But not all heroes were born of gods. Some were simply mortals who refused to stay small. They challenged monsters, defied fate, and occasionally annoyed the gods with their stubbornness. The gods watched with mixed feelings. Athena admired their strategy. Ares cheered their battles. Hera rolled her eyes at Zeus's involvement. And Zeus? He saw them as entertainment, inspiration, and occasionally a reminder that even clay could rise. Heroes became the bridge between heaven and earth. They reminded mortals that greatness wasn't reserved for Olympus. It could be earned through trials, quests, and the kind of courage that doesn't come from lightning bolts, but from within. And so, the Age of Heroes began. Their stories would echo through time, carved into stone, whispered by firelight, and eventually turned into bedtime tales for sleepy dreamers like you. In the Age of Heroes, when mortals dared to challenge monsters and fate itself, one name began to echo through myth and meadow: Perseus, son of Zeus and the mortal princess Danae. Perseus was born in secrecy, raised in exile, and destined for a quest that would involve snakes, stone, and a very specific decapitation. It all began with a wedding gift. King Polydectes, ruler of the island of Seriphos, had his eye on Danae. Perseus, protective and unimpressed, stood in the way. So Polydectes devised a plan. He announced a grand feast and demanded gifts from all his guests. Perseus, young and broke, boasted, "I'll bring you the head of Medusa." Everyone gasped. Even the olives stopped rolling. Medusa was one of the three Gorgon sisters, monstrous women with serpents for hair and a gaze that turned anyone to stone. Unlike her immortal sisters, Medusa was mortal, but that didn't make her less terrifying. Her lair was littered with statues, former warriors, poets, and one unfortunate mailman. Perseus had made a promise, and in mythology, promises are binding, especially when they involve monsters. But he wasn't alone. The gods, ever fond of dramatic quests, stepped in. Athena gave him a polished shield, reflective and divine. Hermes offered a sword sharp enough to slice through fate. He also received winged sandals, a magic pouch, and the helm of invisibility. Because when facing a snake-haired menace, stealth is key. Perseus flew across lands, battled sea creatures, and finally reached the edge of the world, where Medusa slept among stone corpses and hissing lullabies. He didn't look directly. Using Athena's shield as a mirror, he crept forward. The snakes hissed, the air thickened, and with one swift motion, guided by divine precision, Perseus beheaded Medusa. From her blood sprang Pegasus, the winged horse, and Chrysaor, a golden warrior. Because in mythology, even death throws a surprise party. Perseus tucked the head into his pouch, careful not to peek, and flew home. Along the way, he rescued Andromeda from a sea monster, turned Polydectes to stone, a poetic ending, and became a legend. But Medusa's head remained powerful. Even in death, her gaze could petrify. Perseus eventually gifted it to Athena, who placed it on her shield, a reminder that beauty, danger, and courage often share the same myth. In the pantheon of heroes, one name roared louder than thunder and flexed harder than Olympus's marble columns: Heracles. Born of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene, Heracles was a demigod with muscles that could wrestle mountains and a destiny tangled in divine drama. From the moment he was born, Hera, queen of the gods and Zeus's perpetually unimpressed wife, had it out for him. She sent snakes to his cradle. He strangled them like plush toys. She cursed his life with madness. He survived, but not without tragedy. In a fit of divine-induced frenzy, Heracles committed a terrible act, one that shattered his heart and haunted his soul. Seeking redemption, he turned to the Oracle of Delphi, who told him to serve King Eurystheus and complete a series of tasks. Not chores, not errands, labors, and thus began the most exhausting to-do list in mythological history. 1. The Nemean lion, a beast with impenetrable skin and a roar that could curdle milk. Heracles wrestled it bare-handed, strangled it, and wore its hide as a fashionable hoodie. 2. The Lernaean hydra, a serpent with multiple heads. Cut one off, 2 grew back. Heracles burned the stumps and buried the immortal head under a rock. Hydra, defeated. Landscaping, improved. 3. The Ceryneian hind, a golden deer sacred to Artemis. Heracles chased it for a year, caught it gently, and apologized profusely to the goddess. Diplomacy, unlocked. 4. The Erymanthian boar, a wild pig with anger issues. Heracles trapped it in snow and carried it back like a grumpy suitcase. 5. The Augean stables, thousands of cattle, decades of dung. Heracles rerouted rivers to clean it in a day. Ancient plumbing, invented. 6. The Stymphalian birds, man-eating birds with bronze feathers. Heracles used a rattle from Athena to scare them, then shot them down like feathery darts. 7. The Cretan bull, a fire-breathing bovine. Heracles wrestled it, tamed it, and probably considered opening a mythological rodeo. 8. The mares of Diomedes, carnivorous horses, Heracles fed them their owner, Diomedes, not a great guy, and they calmed down. Problem solving, unconventional. 9. The belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. Heracles asked nicely. Hera stirred trouble. A battle broke out. He got the belt. Fashion, acquired. 10. The cattle of Geryon, three-bodied giant. Heracles defeated him, herded the cattle, and walked them home like divine dog walking. 11. The apples of the Hesperides, golden apples guarded by nymphs and a dragon. Heracles tricked Atlas into helping, then tricked him again to take the sky back. Strategy, sneaky. 12. The capture of Cerberus, the three-headed guard dog of the underworld. Heracles asked Hades, politely, wrestled Cerberus without weapons, and brought him to the surface. Pet sitting, extreme edition. Each labor tested Heracles' strength, wit, and patience. He faced monsters, gods, and moral dilemmas. He failed sometimes. He learned. He grew. And in the end, he earned not just redemption, but immortality. Heracles ascended to Olympus, where he was welcomed as a god. Hera, finally letting go of her grudge, even gave him her daughter Hebe in marriage. The hero, who had once been cursed, now poured ambrosia in the halls of the divine. Long before GPS and cruise ships with buffets, there was a hero named Jason, a prince without a throne, a sailor with a prophecy, and a man destined to chase a golden dream across the sea. Jason was the rightful heir to the throne of Iolcus, but his uncle Peleus had stolen it. When Jason came of age, he returned to claim what was his. Peleus, ever the schemer, smiled and said, "Of course, but first, bring me the golden fleece." The golden fleece was no ordinary throw blanket. It was the shimmering hide of a magical ram, guarded by a sleepless dragon in the distant land of Colchis. It symbolized kingship, power, and the kind of quest that usually ends in either glory or a very dramatic funeral. Jason accepted. He gathered the greatest crew ever assembled, a band of heroes called the Argonauts, named after their ship, the Argo. Among them were legends in the making: Heracles, Orpheus, Atalanta, Castor and Pollux, and many more. It was the original all-star mythological road trip, only wetter. Their journey was anything but smooth. They faced clashing rocks that crushed ships like crackers. They outwitted harpies, who tormented a blind prophet. They rode through storms, sang with sirens, and navigated the politics of foreign kings. But Jason pressed on, driven by destiny and a really uncomfortable promise. When they finally reached Colchis, Jason met King Aeetes, who agreed to give him the fleece if he could complete 3 impossible tasks: yoke fire-breathing bulls and plow a field with them, sow dragons' teeth into the soil, which would sprout into armed warriors, and defeat those warriors before they defeated him. Jason was brave, but not foolish. He needed help. Enter Medea, the king's daughter, a powerful sorceress, and a woman with a heart full of fire and a soft spot for reckless heroes. She fell for Jason and offered her magic in exchange for his love. With her enchanted ointments and clever advice, Jason completed the tasks. But Aeetes, like most mythological kings, went back on his word. So Jason and Medea stole the fleece and fled, with the dragon asleep and the stars watching. Their escape was wild. Medea used spells, illusions, and even dark tricks to slow her father's pursuit. Jason returned to Iolcus, triumphant, fleece in hand, destiny fulfilled. But the story didn't end there. Jason's fame grew. So did his pride. and his relationship with Medea, forged in fire and flight, would one day unravel in tragedy. But for now, he was a hero, a sailor who dared the sea, defied the odds, and proved that sometimes the journey is the legend. It began not with swords, but with a golden apple at a divine wedding, the kind where ambrosia flows and thunderbolts are politely checked at the door. The goddess Eris, spirit of discord, was not invited. Offended and dramatic, she tossed a golden apple into the crowd. On it was inscribed, "To the fairest." 3 goddesses reached for it: Hera, queen of Olympus; Athena, goddess of wisdom and war; and Aphrodite, goddess of love and irresistible chaos. None would back down. So they turned to a mortal judge, Paris, prince of Troy, a shepherd with good cheekbones and terrible decision-making skills. Each goddess offered a bribe. Hera promised power. Athena offered wisdom and victory. Aphrodite whispered of love. The most beautiful woman in the world, Helen of Sparta. Paris chose Aphrodite, and so the apple rolled into history. Helen was already married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. But Paris, guided by Aphrodite's charm, sailed to Sparta and swept Helen away to Troy. Whether she went willingly or was taken depends on who's telling the story. Either way, the result was the same: war. Menelaus was furious. His brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, rallied the Greek forces. Heroes answered the call: Achilles, the unstoppable warrior with a vulnerable heel; Odysseus, the clever strategist; Ajax, the towering brute; and many more. 1,000 ships launched toward Troy, sails full of vengeance, pride, and divine meddling. The gods took sides. Hera, Athena, and Poseidon backed the Greeks. Aphrodite, Apollo, and Artemis favored the Trojans. Zeus, ever the neutral instigator, watched from Olympus like a cosmic referee with popcorn. The war lasted 10 years. Battles raged. Heroes fell. Achilles clashed with Hector, Troy's noble defender. Patroclus died wearing Achilles' armor, sparking a fury that shook the battlefield. Achilles avenged him, slaying Hector and dragging his body behind a chariot. A moment of grief, rage, and mythic brutality. But Troy stood strong until Odysseus devised a trick. The Greeks built a massive wooden horse, left it at Troy's gates, and pretended to sail away. The Trojans, curious and celebratory, brought it inside. That night, Greek soldiers hidden within emerged, opened the gates, and unleashed destruction. Troy burned. Priam, the king, was slain. Aeneas fled, carrying his father and the seeds of a new legend. Helen was returned to Menelaus, and the heroes, victorious but cursed, began their long journeys home. The War of Troy wasn't just a clash of armies. It was a collision of love, pride, and divine betrayal. A single apple had unraveled kingdoms. A single choice had rewritten fate. And in the ashes of Troy, stories were born of courage, tragedy, and the fragile line between glory and ruin. The fires of Troy had burned out. The great city, once proud and golden, lay in ruins. Its towers crumbled, its song silenced. The war was over, but victory had a bitter taste. The heroes, who had sailed with pride, now limped home with curses in their wake. The gods, once loud and meddling, had grown quiet. No more thunderous interventions. No more golden apples or divine disguises. Olympus watched from above, distant and cold, as the age of heroes began to unravel. Achilles, the greatest warrior, had fallen, struck down by an arrow to his heel. the one place untouched by divine protection, his rage, his glory, his legend, all buried beneath the battlefield. Ajax, mighty and proud, was driven mad by dishonor. When the armor of Achilles was awarded to Odysseus, Ajax's pride shattered. He fell on his own sword, his strength undone by wounded ego. Agamemnon, the commander of the Greeks, returned home to betrayal. His wife Clytemnestra, bitter and vengeful, welcomed him not with garlands, but with a blade. The king who had sacrificed his daughter for wind was sacrificed in turn. Odysseus, clever and cursed, wandered for 10 long years. He faced monsters, storms, and temptation. He lost his crew, his ships, and nearly his soul. When he finally reached Ithaca, he was older, wearier, and no longer the man who had left. The age of heroes was ending. The gods, once eager to shape fate, now watched in silence. Perhaps they had grown tired. Perhaps they had seen enough. Or perhaps they knew. The world was changing. Mortals stood alone. No prophecies, no divine gifts. Just memory, grief, and the stories carved into stone. The heroes had risen, fought, and fallen. Their names echoed in temples and lullabies, but their time had passed, and yet, in the quiet, something new stirred. Not glory, not vengeance, but wisdom. Mortals began to build, not just cities, but philosophies. They questioned the gods, the stars, and themselves. They wrote poems, laws, and dreams. They stood on the shoulders of fallen heroes and looked toward the future. The gods were silent, but the world was not. The gods once thundered. They danced across the sky, hurled lightning, whispered prophecies, and tangled mortals in webs of fate. Olympus stood tall, a mountain crowned with golden halls and divine laughter. Heroes rose, monsters fell, and the world shimmered with myth. But time, even in legend, moves forward. The age of heroes had ended. Achilles was gone. Heracles had ascended. Odysseus had returned, weary and changed. Troy had burned. The golden fleece had been claimed. The labyrinth was silent. The gods, once loud and meddling, grew quiet. Mortals no longer looked to the clouds for answers. They built cities, carved laws, and studied stars, not for omens, but for knowledge. Philosophy bloomed. Reason took root. The stories of gods became lessons, not laws. Zeus, once the Storm King, watched from Olympus as prayers grew fewer. Hera, proud and regal, sat beside him, her gaze distant. Athena, goddess of wisdom, saw the shift and smiled, for wisdom had found new homes. Apollo's lyre grew quiet. Aphrodite's mirror dulled. Even Hades, deep below, felt the hush. The divine halls dimmed, not with sorrow, but with peace. The gods had shaped the world. Now they stepped back. Olympus remained, but as a memory, a symbol, a whisper in the wind. And the myths? They didn't vanish. They transformed. They became stories, told by firelight, names etched into marble. Dreams passed from parent to child. They lived in poems, paintings, and the quiet wonder of those who still looked up and asked, what if? The last light of Olympus flickered, not as an ending, but as a beginning. A soft glow in the night sky, where myths became stars and stories became constellations. And so, dear dreamer, the saga ends. The gods sleep. The heroes rest. The monsters are quiet. And you, wrapped in blankets and imagination, have wandered through the greatest tales ever told. Close your eyes. Let the myths settle like stardust and drift gently into the realm where stories never truly end. Good night.